You're listening to Well Met, a Hearthstone podcast brought to you by BlizzPro.com.
Well met.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 39 of the Well Met podcast, man. I'm John, I push the buttons every week. I have no idea. That went from Leprechaun to Jamaican, and I'm just rolling with it. From Saskatoon, Canada, it is Kevin Hovdestad. Hey, Kev.
That was something, man. That we might have to take away your show opening remark privileges.
Nope, can't
it's getting
do
out
it.
of hand.
You signed up when you chose me, and you too chose me, by the way. Okay, I didn't choose
It's
you
true.
guys.
That did happen.
I laid it on the table. I
I'd like
signed
to point
on
out
the
you
X.
did have a choice.
I mean, maybe. How did I have a
Maybe.
choice? Anyways, that other beautiful sounding voice, he's back. I know you missed him after a 2-week hiatus. It is JR Cook. Hey, JR.
Hey, John. So I got the DX Racer chair. That,
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, you guys were talking about last week before the show. If I fall back suddenly, it's because the lock on this thing doesn't really fully lock in place. So if I lean back too much, I'll just fall back and die.
You're just gone.
I've had it almost happen 5 times now.
It's designed to help your posture.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what that is.
I don't know. I just feel like that would be a super awesome benefit to our live audience, because clearly it would get edited out, but the live people who are here with us tonight could totally watch JR go flying backwards. Everybody go, oh shit, as we have to stop recording because JR's ass over tea kettle on the floor.
I would pay to see that. Hands down.
And
All right.
John would actually leave it in.
Absolutely.
That's on it.
John would
I would
totally
make
do it.
that our iTunes cover art. This is what that would be.
It's upside down JR.
Yep.
Oh man.
All right, let's talk about our weeks in Hearthstone. JR, how'd you do in Hearthstone this week, man?
Not too bad. I think I went from 15 to about 7. Mostly playing Control Warrior with Elise Star Seeker. It's just your standard Control Warrior. She's a decent 4-drop. I was saying this before we started the show. She's a decent 4-drop that... I mean, yeah, it's good against fatigue. It's good late game. You don't want to play the monkey until you have cards that you can't really use. So if you're holding into your hand Acolyte of Pain and Shield Blocks and things like that, and you're almost out of cards, go ahead and drop that 6/6 and turn them into legendaries. It seems to work pretty good. I've only had to use it twice, I think. But other than that, I mean, it's a decent 4-drop with a cycle ability on down the road.
Nice. That sounds like a fun deck. Make sure that you snap a screenshot or something so we can include it in the show notes, because I think people might like to see that. Or if it's on Reddit or something like that.
No, I can just. I'm actually thinking about writing up a Deck of the Week article about it.
Nice.
And I might be putting that together after the show tonight. So by the time you hear the show, you might already see the article up.
Nice. What about you, Kev? How was your week in the Hearthstone?
Yeah, we talked a little about it before the show, but I've been messing around, still trying to level up. I mean, I said this last week, nothing's changed. I'm leveling up Rogue, playing lots of Tempo Rogue, having a lot of fun with it. I was really hoping, to be honest, that this week's Tavern Brawl would be one of the more fun ones, and I dislike the non-deck building ones, so I didn't get a chance to take advantage of that, because that's a super great way to level classes that you don't have at a high level. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm not as high rank as you guys. I haven't played as much. I've been playing a lot of Heroes of the Storm, and I tried to crank out as much Overwatch as I could on those last couple days before it went down. So, and work's just nuts. I'm kind of in the same boat as JR. I got a week here left. It's just crazy, and then I'm gonna dial things back beyond Christmas break. And to your point earlier, I might make the Legend push later in the month. I think it might be worth doing, because if I've got 2 weeks where I'm not working, I could be streaming it. I could play 5-6 hours every afternoon. People could come hang out. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Nice. Oh, how was my week in Hearthstone? Oh, I'll tell you about it. It was actually really good. I got to do some streaming this last week, so that was fun. We went 9-1 on stream. I was worried a little bit that I had gotten infinitely worse at the game because I was getting stuck around like rank 13 and 14 the first 2 weeks. Everything was just, or not the first 2 weeks, but the first probably about week. Everything just felt like it was so random and I just couldn't figure it out. And so, but climbed up. So sitting up at the top of rank 8 right now and thinking about making a push as well. So yeah, it was a really good, solid week in Hearthstone. Yeah,
I still don't like the way that the Hearthstone ladder reset makes that first week so ugly, because it's not even really a skill problem, right? Like the skilled people still make it to the top. It's not about whether you're good or not. It's literally just there's like a star economy, and until enough people play enough games to put enough stars in the system through win streaks and stuff, or people losing at rank 20 and below, there's just no way to rank up, right? And it means that people ask me, and I'm like, Why aren't you playing Hearthstone? I'm like, I just don't play the first like 10 days of the month because it's not really worth my time. Like I can play and win and lose a bunch of games, but I'm not going to get anywhere. Like you can't honestly rank up efficiently unless you're actually like a Zixo that's going to do it on day one. And I'm not that good. I'm just not.
Yeah, I know you're not.
Rude.
Man,
Rude.
I'm on a roll today. So
it's like Christmas time. Like you could try being nice.
I am nice.
No, we said you're cute. That's different. You can be cute and a jerk.
Nice looking. What? I don't know where this is going. So before we get into all the Hearthstone stuff, we just had one small PSA. As you guys know, we do have a Patreon over at patreon.com/wellmetpodcast. If you are a patron, thank you. If you're not, this probably won't affect you just yet, but if you're thinking about it, you should go check it out. But if you are a patron, you probably saw an email this last week saying how Patreon is changing how they're communicating the amount of funding that a project has. And so we're going to be just reevaluating some of our group tiers and maybe our single tiers to reflect that, because basically now it takes out like taxes and fees ahead of time, so you can actually see the actual amount of support that we get versus like the gross amount. And so that's changed a little bit. So we're going to just reevaluate those tiers because the Patreon has been going great. So that's just a small PSA. Stay tuned for more to come on that. Word? News?
News.
This week in Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft.
Happy Wintervale, champions! It is Wintervale in Hearthstone. You're welcome. Why are you gotta stop doing that, Kevin. You gotta just laugh.
I'm not doing nothing.
And say. Anyways, Wintervale is upon us in Hearthstone. We kind of saw it announced last week, but it's live in the game now via a patch. Goes from December 9th through January 6th. And a few cool new things have been happening. First is we've got some augmented and redesigned game boards. The Griffin in Stormwind has a little red nose, and snow is on all the rooftops, and Christmas lights and stuff like that. Yeah, it was really fun. And your heroes have custom emotes, which has been so freaking fun this last week. So
they're the most annoying emotes in the game right now.
So
as far as bad mannerisms go,
I disagree.
Those are the
like
go-tos right now.
Everyone seems to be a really good sport about it. I haven't had anyone like really salty when that happens. I think it's been great. I've loved it. Anything else in particular about the game boards or emotes that you guys wanted to chat about and talk about? Anything that you guys really especially liked?
I mean, it's cool. It's kind of sad in a way that they're going to go away, because like there's definitely a novelty to seeing the changes to the game boards, and I can imagine a world where if they keep doing this, you could actually get to a point where obviously maybe you don't want like Christmas lights when you're playing in the middle of July, but like it'd be cool if every time you loaded up like the Orgrimmar board, sometimes you get the one where the catapult throws snowballs instead of rocks or whatever. Like there's some neat stuff going on there. It gives the game some personality, right?
Totally. I totally agree. I think they're really cool. I would love it if you could like, it would be an achievement you could unlock, right? An achievement or something, or an Easter egg where you could, even if it's, just for you, right? Because it doesn't really matter, be able to have the winter veil boards be available to you.
Yeah, at some point, like, they could be something that works kind of like a card back, where you could kind of pick and choose which version of a game board you want to see or something. Like, I don't know, who knows, right? There's lots of room for the game to grow into stuff like that, and I dig it. Like, I think it's really cool.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I wish they would have done a little bit more with the actual event, like giving away maybe free packs for playing like on like during the week or something like that. Something like that would have been cool. Actually giving gifts as part of the theme. But just changing the game boards and having the annoying new emote, I guess, is enough for them.
I think it's awesome. I don't care what anyone else says. I love it. Last but not least about Winter Veil is you get 10 free classic packs when you purchase before doing more. Just kidding. It was actually, so when you purchase 40 classic packs or more, you get 10 free packs. So if you are trying to build up your classic collection, go ahead and do that. I said that tongue-in-cheek as a joke because the original banner that they put up did say exactly that. It says 10 free packs when you purchase 40 or more.
And they actually changed,
like, it was
they changed it
on that. So that it says buy 50 packs for the price of 40.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that was really funny. And they corrected it and they're like, yeah, you're right. We probably shouldn't have done it that way, and fixed it right up. But it gave me a good chuckle. So yeah, so if you're
still kind of sad though, hey, like we've talked so much about like they could do something for a sale or a deal, and like to JR's point, like they could give a gift. It could be when you open up your end of the month chest, there's a little Christmas parcel in it with an extra thing of gold or something. Like they can do all sorts of stuff, but no, it's if you spend $50, we'll give you a handful of spare packs from the set that came out 2 years ago. It's like, oh guys, come on.
Yeah,
like,
that upset me too, because if they had made this like any set, like I would have been all over for TGT, because there's still some cards that I need from that set, and I wouldn't have mind spending, however much 40 packs is just to get an extra 10, just because it's more efficient for me to spend that money and get 10 more packs than I would have gotten otherwise. Whereas I already have all the classic cards, I don't need to buy this. It's useless to me. I would have rather they had just, 10 free packs, you still get the money out of me. Just give me those 10 free packs, man.
Well, it looks kind of like not great up against all of the other sales that Blizzard has going on, right? Like you can get World of Warcraft for 75% off. Everything in the World of Warcraft shop is 50% off. Every single thing in Heroes of the Storm, 50% off, which was actually for a lot of them the first time that anything had been on that steep of a discount. You want to buy box copies of any of the StarCraft games, Diablo, the Heroes starter pack, all that stuff's on sale. But in Hearthstone, all they've got going is a couple of free packs if you're dropping a ton of money on the most inefficient way to build up a current collection for the game. That kind of like, I was like, we're all guys that'll spend money on the game, so you just kind of shake your head and move on. But for a lot of people, it's probably like, really? Like, if I was a new person trying to get into the game, that's not actually a useful way to encourage new people to spend money, in my opinion.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad way. I definitely think they could have done it better. But like for me, my brother and one of my best friends who I played World of Warcraft with every night in college, we'd get home from work and we'd play World of Warcraft from like 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., 7 nights a week. It was super healthy for everything that I did in my life. I got them Battle.net gift cards to use for packs in Hearthstone. Because I'm like, right now, 50 packs is more than enough to start building competitive decks with Dust, and then all they really have to do is worry about adventures. I think the next logical step here is to start giving discounts off of the adventure modes. Hey, buy get Nax half off this week only when you buy the full 4 wings. But I don't know. I think I don't think that this sale is for us, whereas every other kind of sale in the Battle or the Blizzard gaming universe is like anybody can take advantage of those, except for like the most hardcore players who own everything already and do everything. Whereas like we're kind of I'd say we're in the upper middle. We're not hardcore, but we're not casual. And it's like, well, I have a couple of classic cards that I need, but it's not 50 packs worth, that's for sure. And I don't need that much dust right now. So, yeah. Anyways, I still think it's cool. Whatever.
Yeah,
Thanks, Blizz.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing.
Bottom line,
Thank you.
It's a start. Like they're moving in a direction that suggests that they're willing to discount things and try new things, and we just want them to move faster. That's not like negative feedback. That's constructive criticism that says, yes, you're doing a good thing. Try doing more. I think is the easiest way to say it.
And if I remember correctly, I think you guys last week were talking about like ideas to bring in players or to change something with. It might have been a few weeks ago. Change something with how adventure modes work, because I remember talking in chat while you guys were there, because I showed up like way late to the show. But my idea with that, with the adventure modes, is just at some point when a new one comes out, give the old ones for free or something to new players, or allow them to unlock them in some kind of way, at least, that is free. And then those that have purchased them with real money or even gold, reward them with like 10 free packs or something like that when it comes out. And that way, one, you're able to give those adventure modes, and give them to new players that may not want to spend. We're closing in on $100 if you want to buy all of them. 75 right now, but next one comes out, talking about $100, right?
$70. Last one was 20.
It was 20. That's right. The others were 25. I forgot about that. Because there's one less wing in this one. But yeah, it just that way you just allow that to happen, and also the players that have already purchased them, they're going to complain that, hey, these are now free, but I spent $25 on them. Give them a little something for that money. That, I mean, really, and this goes back to this deal. 10 packs is not that big of a deal to Blizzard to give out in that sense, especially to people that are already purchasing your stuff to begin with.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting. It's I can't wait to see what they end up doing as far as making the game more accessible. I think we're going to see it in 2016. I think we're going to see the first moves into accessibility, whether that's free content, discounted content, kind of combined content. They kind of bundle it, stuff like that. I'm really excited about it.
I mean, you gotta do something, because right now, like, even like people that I know that haven't played Hearthstone yet are looking at it going, I don't really want to get in it. There's really a lot of stuff there, and it's a little too much for me. And it would cost me a lot to get into it competitively right now.
Totally.
Yep.
Kevin, why don't you go ahead and take us through the meta?
Beat 'em or join 'em.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about in the meta this week, and we're going to go, I think, through it in a little more depth, because the feedback we've gotten from you guys is definitely like, you can go read the meta reports for yourself. We'll still touch on them, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the game and how you can get out there and get your way back up to whatever it is, the rank 5 chest in your gold epic that you're trying to achieve this month. So, big movers and shakers after the last wing of League of Explorers. One we want to call it in particular is the return of Miracle Rogue. Dog was able to get to rank 7 legend playing a Miracle Rogue style deck. And for those of you who don't remember, because this is actually a long time ago now, like this hasn't been relevant in the game in over a year. Yeah. Miracle Rogue was a style of play where players would use Gadget Down Auctioneer, which at the time cost 5 mana, Leroy Jenkins, which at the time cost 4 mana, and a bunch of low or zero cost rogue spells to basically cycle through their deck in a fashion that allowed them to consistently pull out their win condition cards. Not that dissimilar to the way that Patron worked with cycling using Battle Rage. The new deck uses the new rogue card, Tomb Pillager, because it generates a copy of the coin as a death rattle reward to set up a similar thing where you can cycle through a deck really quickly, and uses South Sea Deckhands, Faceless Manipulators, Cold Blood to do that same sort of thing and build a big, real fast win. Because if you've got like a Prep, a Cold Blood, a Deadly Poison, and a couple of coins, you can reach through a lot of your deck. Like you can draw 6-7 cards in a turn, and it's incredible how effective it's been. I think a big part of it being No one's teching for it, and no one expected it, so I don't actually know if this will stick around, but super cool to see it come back. John, you were really excited about this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this, I told you I was playing Miracle Rogue last week, and then you called me on it, and I couldn't let the secret loose, so I'm like, oh yeah, it was Oil Rogue. Totally Miracle Rogue. Absolutely. This is great. Rogue needs a deck, and it needs it, and this is less kind of overpowered than the former Miracle Rogue for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously Auctioneer is one more mana, so that takes it out there. But number two is that it really requires 3 individual cards, to make that work rather than Leroy Shadow Step. Some are running Cold Blood sometimes and stuff like that, where it's a little bit less consistent. And it's a little bit more, you can do a little bit more to set yourself up against it. But at the same time, Dog hit rank 7 with it. And there's a lot of other players. Somebody brought it to the Insomnia tournament today, the True Silver Champion tournament. And I thought that was really cool. I can't remember who it was, and I can't remember how they did with it, but I remember watching the game, and it looks like a really fun deck. So I think it's a good thing for Hearthstone to bring those decks back too, because they do kind of clean up against some of the nastier decks as well that you see on ladder, which maybe means we'll see less of them. I don't know.
I mean, in fairness, though, go ahead, Jer.
To me, it seems like it wouldn't do very, very well against anything that has Reno in it. And I think as long as Reno is popular, I could see this not possibly being as good. But who knows? How have you guys seen it compared with any Reno deck, or have you seen it played against Reno decks?
I mean, I've seen it played on ladder a little bit, and obviously it's getting some tournament play right now. I don't think it's going to stick around, to be honest. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later about which decks might be around for a while post League of Explorers. I honestly think this is kind of a flash in the pan thing where no one was really equipped to deal with it, and the tech to deal with it has just been not played, right? Rogue has a very unique suite of removal. It's kind of like every time Shaman makes a comeback right now, right? Like aggro Shaman came out of nowhere and really blew through the ladder because no one knew what to expect when they saw Shaman on the ladder at all, much less at a high level. And we're seeing this happen again where, like, if you queue up and you hit a mage, for example, you 99% of the time know what you're up against. It's going to be Freeze Mage, it's going to be Tempo Mage, right? Those are the mage archetypes. You rarely see Mech Mage anymore, but as soon as any mech hits the table, you, again, instantly know what you're up against. This is a time in the meta again, and we had the exact same thing after TGT very briefly, and more so even back during the release cycle of Blackrock Mountain when we started the show, where everything's just chaos, and you queue up and you hit stuff on the ladder you've never seen before while people experiment. Reno was the definition of that because everybody was trying to make Highlander-style decks work. I think the stuff that you've seen the last couple of weeks is eventually going to settle back down, and some of these decks are not going to stick around. I don't think Miracle Rogue is actually going to stick long-term. If this kind of thing were viable, you would still see people trying to make things like Malagos Rogue work, because technically, especially after like Emperor Thaurissan and now with Tomb Pillager back in the picture for the extra coins and stuff, like there'd be lots of ways to set it up, but no one does it because it's not sustainable. Like it's cool, but it's not going to work long term. That's my gut.
I do agree with that. I think that's definitely a viable, kind of thing. It's not going to be a combo druid or a mid-range paladin deck where those will always kind of be around until like they fundamentally change the win conditions. I definitely think that it does well against Reno decks simply because Reno decks really struggle against decks that can do damage quickly from like 15, 16, 17, where usually most players are going to hold on to that Reno until you get down closer to 10 or single digits. And a deck like Miracle Rogue, Combo Druid, stuff like that, doesn't do that. Obviously, they kill you from 15, 16, 17 and higher. And so, yeah.
Right, but if you know what you're playing against at that point, you would know when to play your Reno.
Oh, yeah, totally.
If you're going, well, this is the turn they're probably going to try to pull off their one-turn kill on me. You already know that with Rogue, with Druid, because Druid has done it for so long. It's just a matter of learning it with Rogue in this case.
Yeah, but then at the end, if you pull it too early like that, they still have a Tomb Pillager or two on the board, or an Auctioneer or something like that, and you're still having to face down some big threats, right?
Right, but with most Reno decks, at least ones that I've played, it's like after you kind of play that Reno and kind of get back in, at that point you've already established yourself. You're playing these big, huge minions to kind of control the game at that point anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what they're really trying to do is... Go ahead.
A lot of it's going to be tech related too, right? Like, a lot of people at this point are not teching in things like weapon removal because it hasn't been a big deal in the meta for quite a while. The big meta decks haven't been weapon heavy, and so Harrison has kind of fallen away.
You're going to see him come back, though.
Sure you are. The original reason people ran Lotheb was because Lotheb was actually introduced to the game to help solve for things like Miracle Rogue. And honestly, you're not seeing a ton of Lotheb out there right now because it's basically a tech card to stop specific turns in Freeze Mage or combo from Druid. Like, there's just lots of these things that they kind of come and go, right? Like, there's lots of these, like, either way, right? Someone can run mid-range Druid, someone can play Lotheb, and you still, as the Druid, are like, that's okay, I can still play here, I'm fine. It totally ends the game for you as certain other classes. I think that's where Rogue will eventually fall down, or at least Miracle Rogue specifically, is that you don't have any alternate plays. You have no other win conditions. Like, if you get stopped by a big counter tech choice, you're done. Like, you're just dead in the water.
Yeah. Should we go through some of these meta reports now, you think? Or do we want to... You wanted to talk about
before
your
we do
thing.
that, yeah.
Do your thing,
I was going to
Kev.
say, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts, because we kind of chatted about this off the show a little bit, but of the stuff that's come out, because we've seen a few crazy new decks now, right? I would say things like Entomb Control Priest, Aggro Shaman, this new Miracle Rogue, Reno Warlock, like stuff that has made big splashes in the meta as these wings have come out. Which of the new post-League of Explorers decks do you guys see still being around in like a couple of months? Like, once everything's good and settled before the next expansion comes out, which we're guessing is like April, right? But in the interceding period here over the next few months, what do you see sticking around? What do you see people still running on the ladder in February when kids are off on spring break?
One of my first favorites, I think, is Aggro Shaman. I think it's super strong. I think it's the new Face Hunter. Just like Face Hunter technically never goes away. It's more consistent than Face Hunter, has better matchups than Face Hunter, is a little bit slower than Face Hunter, but has the ability to control the board if you know how to play the deck, unlike JR. And yeah, so clearly JR disagrees with me, so I want you to give it to me, JR. Why do you disagree so much?
Okay.
Here? By the way, we did see Aggro Shaman brought, I think, 3 or 4 times to the True Silver Cup today. So just a heads up.
I will say that Aggro Shaman has one thing going for it that the old, like, Undertaker Hunter used to have, is that the fact that if you get the right draw, it gets out of control and is a very powerful deck. I don't, however, agree that it's as good as Face Hunter was, or as good as the Undertaker Hunter was. For the simple fact that I don't think it's as consistent. Like, if you don't get that right draw, I don't think the deck is that good. Like, if you don't get the Tonal Trog to begin with, it gets a little tough to, win beyond that. Yeah, you have the spells and stuff that can help you, like, with that, but if you don't have, like, a very good 1, 2, 3 turn, on your first 3 turns, it's very difficult, I feel, to win with that deck. And I've been finding that consistency of getting that swings very widely. Like, I can get, right off the bat, I can get exactly what I want, but then I'll have 3 or 4 games where 2 of them I get okay, and 2 of them is just bad. And I didn't get that with, like, Face Hunter or anything. Like, Face Hunter, I just always go. Or the old Undertaker Hunter, I just always go. I don't feel that's the same way with Aggro Shaman. And that's why I don't think it's as good.
I would disagree, because I think that's the gamble you take when you play any aggro deck that moves that fast, right? Like, you basically take the coin flip that you're going to get a draw that allows you to win the game outright. And it's the same way with Face Hunter. Like, if you get a crap draw in Face Hunter, if you mulligan poorly and you end up with your opening hand being like a trap, an animal companion,
but my opening hand is And with anything with Face Hunter or Undertaker, my opening hand was almost always good. With Aggro Shaman, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like I always have an always good hand.
There is no such thing as a dead draw in Aggro Shaman. There really isn't. It's either you can point something at the face or you can throw something on the board. It has 8 matchups, according to Tempo Storm, over 60% win rates, okay? Including Paladins, Priests, like those types of decks that Face Hunter would never get away with winning. I'm all okay with you saying that, oh, I don't think it's that great or that consistent of a deck. That's the definition of an aggro deck for the most part. But to say even remotely that it's not as consistent as Face Hunter is, I think, blasphemous.
It's not. It's not even close. Like, I've had so much more luck with any kind of Face Hunter or Aggro Hunter deck than I've had with Aggro Shaman.
You haven't played enough, man.
But anecdotally, sure.
I play aggro all the freaking time.
Not enough Shaman. Got to play the more of that Shaman.
I'm talking about, like, aggro as far as, like, Magic the Gathering into Hearthstone. I play it a lot, and I feel like this is the least consistent aggro deck I have ever played.
All right.
I don't know that I agree with that at all. Like, I mean, historically, we've had some bad aggro decks in Hearthstone. We've had aggro decks that didn't have the consistency, the strong plays that required higher curve, like that went to 5.
Well, I'm talking about as far as top tier aggro decks go.
So am I.
Aggro in general.
I mean, okay. This is probably arguably the best aggro deck that we've seen outside of the brief windows in the meta where aggro Paladin was crazy effective. And that always revolved around a totally different strategy with emptying your hand, refilling with Divine Favor. Like, this is a super powerful deck. It doesn't win every game, if that's the point you're trying to make. No, like, there are going to be games where you get a bad mulligan or a bad matchup.
As when I play an aggro deck, I expect a good turn on my first 3 turns, no matter what I have in my hand. And I don't get that. I don't get that 100% of the time with Aggro Shaman.
I don't think that's how you base it.
Statistics. Yeah, you have to look at the exact numbers, but I would guess that it's less than maybe 1 game in 20 where you straight up lose on bad mulligans like that.
So opinions are good. We have them on Well Met Podcast, and we disagree often. I'm normally wrong, and everyone is very quick to do that out. That's why I facilitate conversation rather than give my input on it, because who wants to hear the guy wrong all day long? But either way, we're going to find out truly in the long run how consistent it is. That's truly what it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, before we jump off of this, is there any other decks? Like Aggro Shaman, I think we're saying has a place, maybe not long term, but definitely has a place that we're seeing in the meta right now. Do you guys feel that way about like Reno Warlock or like the new Entomb Control Priest?
I think the only other one I can think of is definitely Reno Warlock. I think that's going to stick around for a good long while, just for the fact that it's one of those decks that is very slow going out of the gate. It feels very much like Handlock in a way, but once you get going, it gets ridiculous late game. So much so that I lose when I've been playing my Control Warrior. I almost always lose to Reno Log. Because it gets out so many big things I can't deal with.
I think if there's a totally new deck to make it, I think Reno Lock is kind of one of those. I really want one of those Death Rattle Rogue decks to find a way to stick, but I don't know if they will or not. We're talking a little bit about Entomb Priest a little bit too as something that might see. I don't know if I classify that as a new deck rather than just a reiteration on like Control Priest or something like that. But I think for argument's sake, I would throw that one up there too. Put that one in the hat as something that I think will stay.
It's made Control Priest more powerful because you have another removal spell that you get to steal something with.
It was a buff to Control Priest rather than a new type of priest.
Exactly.
I mean, Priest has changed a lot. Like, if you go and you look at like an Entomb Control Priest list, it's a deck that has changed with every single expansion. They added Zombie Chow. They added Sludge Belcher. They added Light Bomb. They added now Entomb, right? They added Justicar. Like, there's been something. So, I mean, I think it's safe to say there's enough new tech between things like Holy Champions, Justicar, Entomb. Like, there's definitely new stuff happening. in the control priest archetype. And I think it's an incredible deck. Like, I think it's one of those things where we don't even really understand how you can actually plan to beat it yet, because you have no ability to account for your big threats hitting the board. Like, Entomb is basically a better Sylvanas because your opponent can't play around it. And that's crazy. Like, that's an incredible thing to have available to you as a player. I, for one, think, like, whatever priest flavor you prefer, whether it's control or dragon, Entomb might be one of the best cards that priest has ever gotten.
If Entomb was out in the classic set, it would have been nerfed.
Yeah, I would actually totally agree with that.
They did it with
agree with that.
mind control.
It's yeah. I mean, it's one of the first ways we've seen to be able to remove that death rattle, you know, and we've kind of needed that, and it puts it in your deck. It's just such a huge swing, especially against such a really strong control deck like that. I totally agree.
And in what appears to be a control heavy meta too. Speaking of which, maybe we should talk about the meta reports.
Bam, ba, ba, ba.
So, which one do you guys want to do first? Because I feel like we probably should do Liquid Hearth because it came out first. Like, it's older.
That's fine.
Fine.
Yeah? Okay.
Fine.
We'll do it your way, Kevin.
We always do it my way. So, Liquid Hearth. No real shocks here, but Paladin distressingly dominant. In a way that I'm beginning to get uncomfortable with, like how long Paladin has just been at the top and uncontested for the top. We see people like try to argue like, oh, Aggro Shaman, Tempo Storm says is better. But the reality is that Secret Paladin, Midrange Druid have been the top 3 decks in the game since long before we ever had League of Explorers. And like, there's new stuff, right? There's Reno Lock and stuff that's kind of like showing up in the top 10. That's cool. But for sure, these 3 at the top, it's starting to feel kind of insane to me. What do you guys think? Like, is there there's no surprises on this list, right?
Oh, there's a big one.
You think so?
I feel Aggro Shaman's clear down to 18. That's a big deal to me because I would, even though I don't agree that it's the most consistent aggro deck in the world, as far as right now, it's probably the best aggro deck, and I'm surprised it's not up there further.
Well, I mean, I think Liquid Hearth underrated it last week. Like, I think we all kind of agreed that it was way lower than it should have been last week, too, with Liquid Hearth. So,
yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. It just surprises me that they have it that low, though.
Sure, okay. I mean, I think that's fair.
Liquid Hearth, though, in my opinion, has always ranked aggro decks a little bit lower. And again, I think it comes from part, like, you don't see a whole lot of aggro in tournaments, and you know, Liquid Hearth really does kind of favor those tournaments. I mean, even look at, Aggro Druid, you know, gets where 7, 8, 9, 9, and
9th overall, yeah,
9th overall. Where, you know, is it still on tier 1 in Tempo Storm? I'm not sure, but I think it is. I think last time I checked, no, it dropped down to it did drop quite a bit down in tier 2. But yeah, so I mean, they always rank it a little bit lower. I think that, yeah, I guess that's all I would say is I think it fits that a little bit, and they've been really kind of standoffish on Aggro Shaman, but at the same time, when you look at Tempo Storm, you might find something completely different. So yeah.
So, okay, before we switch to Tempo Storm...
I'm sorry, we've always kind of said that Liquid Hearth seems to follow more of the tournament meta than the actual ladder meta, whereas Tempo Storm seems to go with the ladder meta. I haven't watched enough tournaments to know if Aggro Shaman's been being played in them, so maybe that's...
Not as much as a lot of other stuff, but I mean, it has been played, yeah. So, okay, before we switch to Tempo Storm, thing worth noting, and we are probably going to talk about this in the Tempo Storm list as well, but weakest class... according to Liquid Hearth, I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, because like Savitz, for example, rates Aggro Shaman quite high, even on Liquid Hearth. So I would say the consistent overall weakest class, according to like the general average here, probably actually Hunter. Like I just write off their like, you know, we're going to put Midrange Shaman at the bottom of the list. Like, Midrange Shaman hasn't been played in a meaningful sense in a very long time. People tried to make it work with totems after TGT, but it just didn't. Hunter, in a crazy bad place, according to these guys. What is up with that?
I think the Reno decks have been a big reason for that. Hunter is all about getting that damage done quickly and getting it done fast and trying to beat you turn 7. And anymore, it's just the game has gotten to a point where it's very difficult for you to do that anymore, where you can put out that kind of damage unless you have the absolute perfect draw to do it.
Yeah, I think Hunter is kind of a flashy. It's kind of a flashy class where holding the board and holding board control is very brief. Mm-hmm. Where in the meta right now, it's very important to have utter board control or to have really strong damage going on your opponent at all times. And so I think that makes it. I think it just is honestly, it's funny. It's too slow to be aggro and too fast to kind of be mid-rangey control stuff. And I think that really punishes right now. So I don't think it's in like a bad place. Played Hybrid Hunter the other day and did pretty well at it, but it's not super favored against any of the really popular decks right now because it can't keep that board control. And if it does, it's not keeping it for long.
And most of the neutral and most of the minions that have come out haven't really helped Hunter. They've been helping other decks. So what you're seeing from Hunter is basically what you saw in TGT. Like Hunter didn't get hardly any help in this last expansion, really, or in this adventure mode, as far as like other classes got, in my opinion.
Sure. And it feels a lot like they were trying to push Control Hunter, right? They tried to make it look like Control Hunter was going to fly. They pushed things like Lock and Load, like Power Shot. Like they really wanted to make it look like Hunter was going to be able to play a late game and refresh its hand and do a lot of stuff. And Discover feels like it should play right into that. But in general, yeah, Hunter has not been very successful. So anyway, let's flip over and take a quick look at Tempo Storm because I feel like this pretty much sums up the problem we have with the discrepancy between these lists. The order on the overall list, other than like where Control Warrior falls, I guess, is basically identical on these two lists with the notable singular exception of Aggro Shaman, which, despite being nearly at the bottom of Liquid Hearth, appears literally at the top of Tempo Storm as the best ladder deck in the game right now, which I don't agree with. I do not think it's that good. So,
I agree.
Yeah, like looking at this, guys, we obviously we're seeing a fair bit of consistency in that mid-range Druid, Secret Paladin, mid-range Paladin, top of the list again. Reno Lock, Patron Warrior showing up very high. There's kind of a mid-range that's a blurry mess that has like all of the mage archetypes. Aggro Druid a little lower on Tempo Storm than it is on Liquid Hearth, but not meaningfully. It feels very consistent with the single exception of this Aggro Shaman. What is it about Aggro Shaman for ladder that has Tempo Storm so jacked on this deck? I don't understand.
I have a little bit of an answer here. So the actual differential for the amount of games that you can play and your win rates, as well as some really favorable matchups on the ladder against Paladin, make it such a good freaking ladder deck. Like when you look at, and again, if you can hit these win rates, right, where it's saying 60% for mid-range Paladin and Secret Paladin, 65 for Control Priest, 70 for Dragon Priest, 70 for Oil Rogue, 60 for Freeze Mage, 65 for Control Warrior. Like those are insane win rates, right? And the fact that you can get so many games off so quickly, it's a natural fit, especially this early in the season. Now watch in the next 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to notice fall back again because people are going to start playing a little bit more control-y decks, a little bit more decks that can handle a little bit more with board control in the early game, like Tempo Mage, Patron Warrior, I think is another really, really good, kind of choice against Aggro Shaman, and more decks like that can hold against aggro early in the game. And I think then you'll see it drop back again to like the top of tier 2.
Sure. Okay, I buy that.
I also find that Tempo Storm has a tendency to kind of go with like the decks that they've kind of helped create in a way, because I think one of the first people I saw play Aggro Shaman was Draenad, and I've noticed that they kind of did that with Zoo a bit, where they kind of ranked it higher than I feel it probably should have been, just because, well, they helped create that deck in a sense, quote unquote.
Well,
sure, and I think they've since kind of like recanted a little bit because they are showing Luffy's deck list now, right? Like they are showing the Luffy style, not the Reynad style. So I think they've kind of gotten over that to a point, but I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right. They do kind of see themselves as helping to define the meta because they literally produce one of the only good meta reports in the entire world. So there is that. Question for you guys then, because of all of these things, because of what we said about which decks we think are going to stick around, and this will be the last thing we'll talk about on the meta, and then we'll move on. There's nothing right now in the meta that really looks like it has the crazy board wiping, like OTK properties of Patron, right? Like there's lots of decks that can do lots of damage, but nothing like that. Do you guys think there's a place in the meta right now, just looking at kind of where we are in the cycle, for somebody to make a really defensive deck work? Like we haven't seen anybody in a long time try to make like a wall druid, or heaven forbid, I know JR is probably going to go crazy here, but like a taunt warrior. There's probably something out
Bolster
there, right?
warrior.
There's probably got to be something out there that could stop this, because all of these decks are just super reliant on being able to push a ton of damage to the face after a big combo turn. It's a different turn in every deck. Druid, it's 9. Aggro Druid, it's like 5. Secret Paladin, it's obviously 6 or 7, depending. Even the new Patron Warrior, really, like it all kind of lands in that same sort of turn 6, 7, 8 range. Like, could somebody not make like a crazy defensive deck with a bunch of like Sludge Belchers, Ancient of Wars, like something, just hold against these decks? Because it doesn't feel like any of them have a true ability to overcome just constantly being forced to trade like that. They run out of steam. They don't have the ability to sustain. Or am I crazy? I could be crazy here.
I think having a defensive deck in Hearthstone is very difficult to have to begin with, just because like you can go for crazy amounts of taunt, but then you're giving up like any kind of damage or any kind of like control that you can do. And where like defensive decks, especially when you go into Magic the Gathering, like the way the game is played is I get to pick what I get to defend with as my creatures wise. And in Hearthstone, I play my card, I pass my turn, and then the other person gets to decide basically what happens to my creatures at that point. And so they're kind of more in control. So it's very difficult to play the defensive decks just because of the way that Hearthstone is played. Because I can't be in control of my defenses. My attacker is my opponent is in control of my defenses, basically. So I think it's very difficult to put that together, even though I want to see a taunt warrior work.
To add on, and I'm going to be very careful with how I say this, I think those really defensive decks rely so much on your opponent making unfavorable trades to gain that card advantage and to get them run out of steam. But I think that especially in the kind of hybrid to mid-range type decks that are really popular right now, there's so much reach. There's so many spells. You're talking abusive sergeants. You're talking lava bursts, right? Things like that, in 2 cards, you can get through an Ancient of War, right? Which, as an aggro deck, you really couldn't do before, right? On a face hunter, unless you have, a hunter's mark or, some board control and a kill command or something like that. It usually takes 2-3 cards to do it. And I think that these hybrid to mid-range decks are much better at doing that, to where I see that as like why we haven't seen that, because it makes perfect sense. But I think that those reach cards, those implosions, abusive sergeants, Defender of Argus, things like that, make them much more resistant to those defensive decks than we might really see. I still, to your point, I think that if there was a time to have a deck like that, I think now would be the time. But if I had to guess why we're not seeing that yet, besides the fact that those decks aren't fun to play, and I don't want to play against them because, as we talked about earlier in the show, or before the show, I won't bring that up, don't worry. So that's what I would say.
Fair enough. I mean, I think you're right, and I think the reality is that right now people play like mid-range styles or the things that verge on control in the sense that we've come to understand it, like control priest, control warrior, where control doesn't actually mean that you have a board and your opponent doesn't very often. What it usually means is that you get to dictate the pace of the trades, right? You've got the ability to play a ton of very efficient removal, put down threats of your own, because ultimately control decks are not trying to win the game by attrition. They're trying to win the game by getting more favorable transactions out of the board than their opponent does. So there's definitely an element of that. You're right. Like if you play an Ancient of War and your opponent just skids past it with an Ironbeak Owl, you've accomplished nothing. And I think there's a lot of people who have just accepted that that's a huge risk and not worth it, as opposed to using their, late game turns to develop their own threats that they can either trade with or push their own advantage with if they're given that opportunity. So yeah, I mean, it's probably just not actually going to be very effective, which is too bad. You're right. Like, I think now is the time if it's possible, but I don't have any idea how you'd do it.
I think the only way that you would see it is probably possibly in the tournament scene where playing decks that aren't like super quick, super efficient, don't have the same amount of impact that it does on the ladder. Because on the ladder, you want to, just because of the way the ladder is designed, you want to play your fast, efficient decks with the high, with the high win percents and as fast as possible, win or lose, to rank up, because you only got 30 days to do it in. Whereas in tournaments, you don't really have that incentive to, you want to play your high percentage win decks, but there's no incentive on doing it fast or not. And I don't think defensive decks are going to have that high percentage win anyway. Just because, once again, because of the way Hearthstone's designed.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. All right, so that's it. That's the meta. If you guys have feedback on what you want to hear about as far as the meta segment in the future weeks, hit us up, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go into our next segment here.
The Pro Corner.
Man, if you're wearing headphones for that sub hit, it feels amazing. So this week, we normally try not to get too into the deep end on the uber competitive side of Hearthstone. Not that we don't think it's awesome, because we do. We love the competitive things about Hearthstone, and it's in a really healthy place right now. But we've got a wide range of audience, and we are going to dedicate this next part of the show to something that is a little bit more competitive based than we normally would. But I think it's really important for anyone who really appreciates Hearthstone, especially from the competitive level, to kind of wrap their ears around, I guess, and kind of, start familiarizing themselves with names and stuff like that. And so we're actually going to talk about this great PC Gamer article by Nidra, who went and assembled a jury of some amazing Hearthstone personalities and players to kind of determine a Hearthstone players' power ranking of 2015. So in his jury included Raven, Frodan, Savitz, Noxious, Chalky, Nimsh, Aquablad, Nidra himself, Robert Wing, former co-host of the show. So GG's to Robert if he's listening, and Sottle and Azumo Cutie. So some big...
And Kibler.
And Kibler. Did I miss Kibler on there?
Kibler too.
Well, Kibler too. So a bunch of huge names. And what they did is they were pulled to create a long list of like the best players in their opinion, and then they were then asked a second time to narrow it down to their top 10, and then kind of aggregated everything, kind of similar to like the Liquid Hearth power rankings. And so we wanted to just kind of run down the list here. We're going to spend, just for sake of time, we're going to spend a little less time on the top half of like 10 through 5. We're going to spend a little less time, or 10 through 6, and spend a little bit more time on 5 through 1, and then talk about who we think might have been missed on that list. Kev, JR, you ready?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this. Let's get into it.
Resident sleeper for me, but
it's all right. You bring a whole other perspective about this, so I think this will be cool to have your input on. So coming in at number 10 is Kong, Strifecrow, Shu, and Jungsu Surrender Kim. Really kind of quickly about these guys. Most people have probably heard it Strifecrow at some point. Mid-range Druid, arguably the most timeless deck we've seen in Hearthstone. Strifecrow. So, yeah, really great here. Kevin,
Strifecrow's one of those names that's been around since early beta and has always been around the scene. Like, he's the one name on this list that I've seen since the beginning and still around today. Like, at a very high level.
Awesome. So what do you guys think of Strifecrow? I think down to number 10, and Surrender coming in at number 10, making a list as one of the few on this list not from NA and EU.
That's something I think we'll have to get into a little bit, because like the article did note, because this was a PC Gamer piece that this was published on, and they put Tiddler Celestial at number 11, just narrowly missed the list, and they also had Kranich just barely not on the list as well, because he was the only person who both World Championships as a finalist. So I mean, it does feel a little slanted. It feels like this list definitely gives some like favor to people that speak English. I hate to say it. Like, that's kind of how it feels, but that's what it looks like, right? But no,
I was going to say the same thing, because I didn't see any of the name, like any Asian, Eastern Asian names on this list at all.
Totally. But no, I mean, Strifecrow, like, great guy, phenomenal sense of the game, and also very personable as a person, like, nice dude. I think his place on this list makes sense because he hasn't put up a ton of major results, right? Like, he's a guy that's crazy good at the game. We all love him. But he's not winning tournaments. He's not getting trophies. He's not getting big cash payouts of prize money. He's probably making a tasty salary and just living a great life, but he's definitely not a top tier player on the competitive spectrum right now.
Yeah, especially in kind of premier stuff. He hasn't, done too well. The Vigame House Cup number 3 was the best finish he's had in a premier tournament, and that was second. Only for $5,000, not, I mean, only. But the rest of his stuff has been, kind of in majors. So, like, besides this $5,000, and there's one time where he won $7,500 at the Hearthstone World Championships last year. Like, his max purse almost every kind of, this whole last year was kind of in the 2,000 range, kind of a piece, just kind of chipping away at it. They didn't perform well at ATLC, even though they were looking really good going into the finals and stuff like that. So I guess it does make sense. I just think for the type of players you want to see at the top, I really feel like Strifecrow is one of those guys. I learned, like, one of the most valuable lessons in Hearthstone I learned from Strifecrow about tilt, because he doesn't tilt. He really doesn't. Like, he'll just be like, oh, that was frustrating. Where I'd be throwing stuff like all the way across the room. I have a broken mouse to prove it. It scared Katie the first time she saw me really freak out about a really salty moment. And so I just think for the game, he's a good personality to have and a good person you want to see do well, because I think he sets the tone for what is expected out of other players.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love the guy, and I think this list definitely, as we get into it, what you're going to see is it's going to show some favor to people who've performed well in recent memory, like people who have put up major results in the last, like, year and a half, right? And I feel like it's very specifically that way because the next couple of names we're going to get into on the list, like, we don't see major deck building innovators. We don't see a ton of people who do really well on the ladder. This is very much a list that's governed by performance-based results, in my opinion.
What do you guys think about Surrender in at number 10? Because we're not going to spend so much time on 9 through 5, I don't think, but I would love to kind of know your thoughts on that.
It's the first time I've heard of him.
Yeah,
Fair.
It's a bit of a surprise to me, considering that spot in my mind would have been like a Kranich, a Tiddler, for sure Kranich, honestly. Like, his
agree.
omission from this list is the most noticeable thing, in my opinion, especially given that it's a results-driven thing. So,
Right.
Yeah, bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I've been looking at, and again, he's one of the few that we have from. He's the only one that we have from, like, Asia Pacific, and naturally, we don't get to see that much from him. But he's got a pretty impressive lineup. I guess I can see it. And if the players do vote, clearly it was voted by the players. So clearly amongst pros, they've been following him and I think that he's an incredible player. So, yeah, let's jump down to number 9 here. Number 9 is going to be Sebastian Zixo Bentert, I guess. That would be it. Zixo, though, as you most know him, one of the most prolific ladder players that we have, almost first every season. I think there was one season where he got first legend on 2 different servers. Like, he went through like that much faster than everybody else. I think it was in the patron. Was that in the patron warrior meta where he was super just ahead of the curve on that?
There was that. He was also, before that, the first person to ever hold rank 1 on all 3 servers as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's incredible. Formerly of Team Archon, 28,000 in winnings, currently with Navi, and doing some great work. I think it makes a lot of sense to put Zixo in this top 10 list, and I think 9 suits him right. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I can get behind the placement. I feel like it's tough because this is like the opposite of what we just said about Strifecrow. Like, I really love Strifecrow as an influence on the scene, and I feel like he's a very mature professional influence on the scene, whereas Zixo, I feel like, incredible player, mind for the game like no one else, but he's the antagonist, right? He plays the role of the bad guy, and he's chosen that personality, and he's very vocal about it, and we've seen that in some of the stuff that's gone on with him moving from Archon to Navi, and just in general, like the way he talks on stream, on Twitter. Like, I think he's an incredible player. I just wish he was 10 years older. Is basically all I can say.
All right. I can get behind that. Let's jump down to number 8 here. Alexander Kolento Malsh of Cloud9 from Ukraine. Lifetime winnings, $97,150. If you've heard of Strifecrow, you've heard of Kolento, obviously. Huge streamer, excellent player, brain and a half. I think people respect him so much, and yeah, I think this is great. I think in 2014, and I think the article even talks about this, in like 2014, he probably would have been on the top of the list. But just from, doing not mediocre, but not as well as he did in 2014 and 2015, ranked him a little bit lower this year. How do you feel about this ranking, Kev?
Good, honestly. I mean, again, good kid, plays well. As the token Eastern European in certain ways, I kind of feel like it had to be him or RDU that made this list. And between the two of them, Kolento, I think, is the better player. So I'm glad to see him on the list. He, to me, feels like he has actually maybe fallen off in more ways than Strifecrow has. Like, he feels less relevant to the scene, but put up better results, right? And like we said earlier, results-driven list. JR, I mean, Kolento. We've talked about him before. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'd probably... Same thing. He was really big into the scene early on, especially going into the beta, things like that. I agree. He's probably not as high up in the last year as what he's been in the past. So I agree with it.
Yeah. Let's jump into number 7 here. Frederick Hoy Nielsen from Denmark. He's on Navi and lifetime winning 27,000. This is one of the sleepers that I actually really strongly agree with. Among the pro circles, like, the dude is invaluable for the stuff that he's doing. He plays consistently well. I like he was playing in a tournament. I can't remember which one, but he had a little parrot bird on his shoulder while he played, so I appreciated that too, because that's totally relevant when you're ranking Hearthstone players. And
was he playing a pirate deck? Because that would have been awesome. That
would have been perfect. Throw on the eye patch and everything. That would have been beautiful. No, he wasn't. But yeah, I think it just makes sense. He's a total mind gamer. He understands the game theory that goes into Conquest, as well as just choosing decks. And, he plays the game outside of the game really well as the game inside of the game. And I think that's why you can rank him so high. But I'm curious to what you think, Kev.
I mean, I dig his inclusion on the list, absolutely. And I think you're right. He's someone that has a ton of potential. I am a little surprised to see him ahead of Kolento, even maybe ahead of Zixo. Like, I do think that there's definitely people on this list, obviously further down the list as we get into the top end, but also just the guys we've already talked about who've put up better results than he has. So, I mean, like, from a public-facing perspective, like, we know a lot more about the practice circles and some of the stuff that goes on in the pro scene and how he's helping out with coaching and stuff. And they talk about that actually a fair bit with some of these guys later on. I don't know. I would have maybe pushed him. like I don't feel like 7 is a wrong place for him on a top 10 list, but I feel like ahead of Kolento, given the results factor, kind of a surprise to me.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Let's go into number 6. Stanislav Sivka from the Czech Republic. He is currently teamless. Lifetime winnings of 22,000, just over. And yeah, I think when you talk about consistent players who I want to see more in 2016, Stan Sivka is one of those. I just don't see him enough. Maybe he's just not playing in the right tournaments. Maybe we're just missing each other, whatever. But when you go and look at his bio, he's done incredibly well. He's really well known. He's a former Magic the Gathering player, isn't he, JR?
I've never heard of the guy, to be honest.
I could have swore that he was a Magic the Gathering player, but either way, super well respected overall. No doubt number 6 is a great place for him.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder, like, if the EU isn't a touch more competitive than NA right now in certain respects because of stuff like just how many big EU guys, like we've just gone down EU as we've gone down this list in the last 4 people. Like these are big names, and I think there's some pretty impressive stuff happening. Like their meta moves faster than ours does, I'm pretty sure. As 3 NA guys, right? Like we can't really say with any authority, but it feels that way as like a third party uninformed spectator.
Yep. I think too that they're just a lot closer. Like their practice groups and stuff just seem to be like everyone's involved. I mean, today there was a show match between Life Coach and Zixo, 21 games. Aggro Shaman versus the new Control Warrior type variant. Not like Super Control with like Star Seeker, but stuff like they just seem to be really tight in kind of how they communicate, and I would totally agree with that.
Also, if he's teamless, that could be a huge factor in ability to travel to tournaments. So that might be a really obvious like issue when you think about it that way. I could see him being struggling because if you don't win your way into tournaments that are paying travel, right? Because we've talked about that being a factor in like next year's World Championships. It's tough. Like it's expensive to get to and from these tournaments. If you got to drop $1,500 to go to a tournament where if you get eliminated in the first round, you win nothing. Like it's a pretty big expense. And if you've got no team, it's an even bigger expense.
Totally. Let's go into number 5 here. We're getting to the top 5. This is exciting. Number 5, Adrian Life Coach Coy from Germany. He's from G2 Esports, formerly of Team Nihilum, my favorite team in Hearthstone. Lifetime winnings over $100,000 at 104,500. I still feel like overall, if I'm talking about the complete package of what I think a Hearthstone player is, I think of Life Coach. And if that were the criteria for this, I would put him at number 1. He's a brain. He's respectful. He understands the game. I mean, just go read his stream, like how he talks about his stuff. Go to one of his practice sessions where all he does is just watch film, basically, with viewers and talk about plays and what he could have done differently. And I think you would agree. I think he's one of the, I think he is the greatest player in Hearthstone, like overall. The way he coaches and mentors. I mean, look at RDU and Tice, right? I think RDU is like 19 or 20, and Tice is, 22? 2 of the best players in the world, and he's largely considered the mentor of that. And RDU especially has become significantly better, and I think it's a lot to do with having Life Coach on that team. What do you think?
I think Life Coach has been around for a long time, too, in the scene. I remember him playing in tournaments, in Mana Grind tournaments before Hearthstone was even out, when they were playing with Cockatrice.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like to your point, Jay, or to your point, John, about like complete package, I would say he's maybe not a tremendous innovator in the space. Like he plays really well. I would say he's maybe not like the strongest player in terms of things like the Conquest format. He doesn't necessarily play the mind game thing quite as well as a lot of other guys. But if you were to make a list of most analytical players, that list would just be Life Coach's name over and over and over again. Like the guy is so good at the analysis, and he's the only person where like I sit and I watch him wait out that rope every turn, and I like it doesn't even bother me. I'm like, yeah, no, I actually know he's doing something with that time.
Exactly.
This is impressive.
Yeah, wow. Totally. So at number 1, Life Coach. Let's go to number 4. Just kidding. He's at number 5. Number 4, Ryan Purple Murphy Root from Canada, Gamers Origin, lifetime winnings just over $25,000. I'm not huge on Purple, so I don't feel good about giving the intro or talking about him too much. Maybe Kevin, this is a guy you want to chat about, fellow Canadian.
He is a Canadian, which he has going for him right out the gate. He's a good player, and I feel like he really has been sort of the, like, I don't want to say champion, because, I mean, he's phenomenally good. I feel like he's kind of the torchbearer for North America in terms of a lot of, like, he's somebody people are really excited about, can get behind. They appreciate the candor with which he talks, the level at which he plays, the risks he's willing to take, right? I feel like we talked a lot on the last show and in general about like appetite for risk as a factor in just ladder and how you choose your decks, stuff like that. He's a guy who takes risks. He looks at the meta, makes judgment calls, and shows up to the World Championships with Oil Rogue, like crazy talk. But he's had stuff work out for him. I don't know that he's getting the benefit of being on a great team anymore. Is maybe holding him back a little bit. And I don't know that I'd have put him at number 4 on the list because, again, I'm thinking about this from a results perspective, and he hasn't put up, like, you just talked about Life Coach with over $100,000 in career earnings and in prize money, and then Purple is ahead of him with a quarter of that. Like, that's maybe a little curious to me, but, like, super nice guy. I think he's destined to do a lot of good things, and I think if he keeps at it with Hearthstone, he's definitely probably one of the, like, he would be top 4 on my NA list. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's no question.
Fair.
There.
Okay. I think one thing I would say too is I think why he is so high up on the list, because while he personally has not won a whole lot, he is probably one of the players most responsible for other players that we're seeing winning, right? He's known in the pro scene as an incredible coach and an incredible, just an analytical guy. I remember during the Hearthstone World Championships, they talked about how great he is at, analyzing a situation and making the mathematically correct play every time, and is a firm believer that in the end, the math wins, and that's the consistent way to get wins. And it took him all the way to the Hearthstone World Championships, so you can't be completely wrong. There's definitely a place for risk in Hearthstone, totally, but that's his play style, and I think people really respect him for it. Let's talk about number 3, James Firebat Kostasic from the USA. From Team Archon, of lifetime winnings, $154,495. He's trailed off a little bit towards the end of 2015 as far as high finishes. We haven't seen him a whole lot in big tournaments, maybe taking a step back. And so I think that makes sense, putting him at 3, where I think even 6 months ago, or a little bit farther back, I think I would have still put him at number 1. But yeah, he's just kind of trailed off a little bit. Obviously, incredible innovator. One of the most, I would put him up there. Like if I couldn't pick a life coach for my analytics team, I would put a Firebat, especially with the way he's able to look at and analyze matchups and stuff is incredible. What do you think, Kev?
I love the guy. Firebat is, for me, one of the people who is not only good at the game, but also has a good, I think, mind for where it has strengths and weaknesses in the public eye and being willing to talk about them openly. I think there's definitely a value in that, and I think he, as a player, enriches the sort of broader Hearthstone community with the way that he actually interacts with what the average player wants to hear about. And on top of that, happens to be last year's world champion and really freaking good, and a former StarCraft pro, which, gets him bonus points in my books. But yeah, no, I think he's still an incredibly relevant player. And I think the drop-off at the end of 2015 is really obvious because there's no tournaments to play in other than the tail end of the World Championship and all the stuff leading up to it. Like, I think you'll see him come back in 2016 after this kind of off-season is over, and I expect to see him do well. So yeah, 3rd place for me makes total sense. I can totally get behind that.
Yeah. Let's talk about number 2. Number 2 is Tice, and I'm not going to try to say his last name. I'm sorry. But yes, Tice, ranked number 2. Obviously, if you listen to the show over the past couple months, we felt that he was really strongly favored going into the Hearthstone World Championships. And I think we would still stand by that assessment pretty strongly. He's obviously incredible. He's got a great team behind him. Did great in ATLC. I'm going to get hated on a little bit here, but I don't like Tice at number 2. Tice is one of my favorite players of 2015. But if you look at Tice before ATLC, he actually didn't do that great. And I think it's just too short of a span to put him at number 2 in the world over Life Coach, over Firebat. I think it's a little. I think I would have put him at 4 or 5. But I still think he's incredible. And when you finish second in the world, you're gonna get ranked very high, and I totally get that. But removing myself from that, I think I would rank him a little bit lower. And I'm one of Tice's biggest fans. So.
See, I would have put him at number 1, just for the fact that I feel that for the last several months, many months, he's been the absolute best Hearthstone player in the game, and I feel he was just one turn away from basically probably taking the WCS championship from Ostakaka. Granted, they didn't play in the finals against each other, but I feel Tice would have won that final matchup had he gotten there.
Sure. And that basically was the final, the
Right.
game between the two, the semifinal.
Yeah, it was one turn that basically determined who was going to win that. So I think he would be number 1.
Tice has been at the top of the like ELO charts and all the third-party like analysis sites for a very long time. He's basically been considered the player to beat worldwide for quite a while. Like you say, John, probably the last 6 months. I don't know. I mean, I think the challenge here for me is this list has started to drift as we get into this kind of top 5 away from the results-driven list that I thought it was going to be when we started reading it, right? And into something that's sort of like who had a crazy good year, right? And that's what it's kind of supposed to be, right? Is best of 2015. But it's hard when you think that there's so many criteria that aren't maybe factoring in, right? You're not seeing the innovators. You're not seeing the up-and-comers. You're not seeing the consistent players, right? Like, we made the point already about Kranich not making the list at all, right? Like, Tice having an explosive 6 months, to your point, is probably not as valuable as somebody like Kranich who can repeat and show up at the World Championships twice. So, I don't know. I guess for me, I err on the side of people who demonstrate that they're going to stay relevant. And we've got some guys on this list that have been relevant and look like they're going to stay relevant. I think Tice will stay relevant. I think he's going to have a really successful 2016. Yeah. But we're not at a point where, like, we're not predicting the best of 2016. We're talking about the best right now. And it does feel a little odd to give him so much credit for what was a phenomenal 6 months, but for 6 months.
Definitely. So yeah, that's my that's my thing. I don't think it's wrong to put him at number 2. I don't want it to even seem in the slightest that I don't think he's an incredible player and one of my favorites in the world, and I think still one of the best. I just don't think he had the track record through 2016 or 2015 as some of those other players did, who are even ranked a little bit lower. Let's talk about number 1 though. Number 1, Sebastian Ostkaka Engwall from Sweden of Team Navi, winning just over $107,000. Incredible player. He reminds me a lot of Purple, but I'd say a tier above, where much more widely regarded as an incredible player amongst other players than he is amongst Hearthstone fans and things like that. Obviously, he's the world champion in the world, and I think, you know, that this kind of is a recognition as well to the format, that the world championship format puts that number 1 player in the world, truly number 1 in the world, and I think it makes sense. I think you can make arguments for no and yes, but I'm not going to argue it. What do you think, Kev?
Yeah, no, I mean, bottom line, like I said, I went into this expecting a results-driven list, and it would feel very odd not to put the guy who just won the World Championships not at the top of the list. You could split hairs over whether, like, other players are mechanically better than he is. They probably are. Like, I don't think he's necessarily the best player in the world by virtue of never making a mistake or by being an innovator of new deck lists, a phenomenal deck builder, the most analytical player. Obviously, we talked about that already. Like, I think he's one of those complete package players that is super good at the game as a whole, and probably to a point, to kind of the stuff I was saying earlier about guys like Firebat, does bring value, kind of enrich the scene by being just a really like generous, personable, easy to get along with person. Like, the face of Hearthstone esports right now is a guy who's not really cocky, not really arrogant. Like, he's soft spoken, polite, wins with authority, plays well, doesn't seem like he'd be the kind of person to refuse to concede defeat when he's losing. Like, I like having him as a world champion. And so for me, sure, I can't imagine a world in which people wouldn't look at him and say, yeah, he's definitely one of the best Hearthstone players in the world. And as the reigning world champion, put him at number 1 on the list. Sure.
As someone who doesn't pay attention to the pro scene as much as you guys do, and probably less than most of our listeners do, I had never even heard of Ostakaka until he went to the World Championships. I didn't really see him a lot in tournaments, at least the ones that I watched. He was just someone that I didn't really know that well until the World Championships, and then then I got to looking into him, and I'm like, okay, well, he's done things obviously, and he's gotten here, and but beyond that, he won the World Championship. Okay, that's probably why he got number 1. But watching him play in those finals, like, I wouldn't have put him there. I really wouldn't have. I probably top 3, sure, but probably not number 1 on this list at least.
Well, I mean, going into the World Championships, like, when we were looking at how things were progressing through the regional championships and the way things played out, like, no one even thought he was the best player in Europe in that particular tournament, right, much less the whole world. Like, you're right that he was probably a little bit under people's radar up until recently, and now, like, by every metric, he's one of the best, right? Like, if you were to go and look at Gosu Gamers right now, the top of that list includes all people on this list with the notable exception of Dog. The rest of that list is basically this list, slightly modified by rank by a couple of points here or there. Like, there's only a handful of people, like half a dozen people with really, really high, consistent pro ELOs based on their Hearthstone results, and Osaka is second place on that list right now and has been right up there for a very long time. So I think he's a natural fit for first place as the world champion. Had he not won the world championships, he would not be at first place on this list.
I don't even know if he'd be on the list. Oh, yeah,
I mean,
probably would.
He'd probably be like closer to the bottom.
7, 8, yeah.
But it's the world championship win that put him at the top of the list.
And it should. That should carry a lot of weight, right? So, totally. Yeah. All right, guys, that is our 2015 in review of kind of Hearthstone players. Who was the best? I hope it wasn't too much competitive stuff for you. Before we move away from it, we did want to chat about one quick thing before we jump out. Is any noticeable names missing from this list that you really think deserve to be on that list? Kev?
Okay, for me it's tough because I care a lot about the Hearthstone scene as a whole and not just the tournament space. So I'm shocked not to see some of the big streamers, some of the big, like, really well-known team players, some of the deck innovators and builders. So for me, like, off the top of my head, without even looking, I would say no Kibler is a bit of a surprise to me. No Jab is a huge surprise to me. I would even go so far as to say no Trump is a bit of a surprise to me. Because these are people who I totally consider pillars of Hearthstone as a competitive game, not just an esport. Other than that, I mean, I think it's a really good list. We've talked about it several times. I do think Kranich is a noticeable omission. But no, I mean, outside of those handful, it's a good list. It's a really good list. I do think Jab deserves to be on it, even in the shape that it's in right now. If you wanted to talk results driven, I would say he probably edges out Strifecrow for that 10th place spot even. So,
sure.
Kibler, Trump, Kranich, and Jab would be the ones I think should have been on the list.
I have 2 on my list that share with yours. I think Trump and Kranich both deserve it. I think Trump had an incredible year. And especially if you look at his 2014, like if I look at like a most improved Hearthstone player, it'd be Trump, because before he was kind of like, it was almost a little bit of a sideshow. It's like he's a streamer, he brings in the viewers, let him play, and he gets trounced on in tournaments. He played really, really technically well all throughout 2015, so I think he deserves some credit there. But the two others I had that you didn't is Tiddler Celestial. Incredible. Again, totally, kind of Asia Pacific, China meta stuff. But he's always been incredible, solid, and has, the best roster of players on his self-named team, Tiddler Celestial. So, so good on him. And then the other one I have is RDU. So I did add RDU there. I do think he deserves to be on the list. I think he's shown it. He played well. And plus, he just won a big premier tournament today, which obviously wasn't factored into the article.
An article written 4 days ago, yeah.
Right. But he won today, and he played really well all throughout it. So those are the two that I would add.
I'm surprised you didn't go for Super JJ, because you're always so hot on him as a player.
I'm not hot on Super JJ. I've watched him maybe 5 times.
I mean, I feel like you talk about him with reverence as a player, but okay, that's fair.
You got to be thinking of someone different.
Maybe. I could be totally off base.
Just saying? Is it just saying? You think I'm talking about Tempo
No,
Saiyan?
I was thinking Super JJ.
Or Amnesiac, maybe?
No, that kid's a kid. He's a child. No,
yeah.
I don't know.
So, anyways, I have no idea, because I've not really watched Super JJ.
I'm disappointed. There's one name missing from this list that I feel should have been on this list, and that's myself.
Dang it, JR, I knew you were going to say that.
Dad jokes. Hashtag dad jokes.
I know that Robert wrote me in somewhere in the top 10. He just couldn't convince the others to get me there.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, you did mention, too, JR, that you were a little shocked not to see Hotform on the list.
Yeah.
You had said that earlier.
Yeah. If I would have rewritten this list, I probably would have had Hotform in the top 10. I probably would have had Kranich.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cool.
And probably RDU, because I do agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Guys, we got to get out of here. This was a long show. Thanks for bearing with us for our hour-and-a-half show. Hopefully it was good to listen to. We really hope you enjoyed it. So we did get emails this week. We just didn't get time to them. Didn't expect to go that long into the top 10 players in Hearthstone. But let's go ahead and run down the list here. First and foremost, Patreon. Kev, what's the deal with our Patreon?
Well, like you said at the start of the show, we are in the process of reevaluating some stuff with Patreon, just because they made some changes on the back end to how the amount of money that you are supporting us for is displayed. They're shaving off the 15% or whatever in like fees and administrative costs. So we're going to redo our system a little bit over the coming month or so to reflect that. In the meantime, if you're a fan of the show, you want to support it, our next goal is to do updated intro and outro to the show, some host introductions, that kind of good stuff. Exactly what that goal will be financially is going to change, but we really are excited about it. So to those of you who are supporting us towards that already, thank you so much. Anybody else who wants to get into it, we would really appreciate that. This week, we are shouting out Punk Rockin' 4220. Did we not mention him last week? But thank you so much for supporting the show. That means a ton to us.
Sorry.
It's awesome. And every one of you that supports this show, it means a ton. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And let's jump over to iTunes reviews, JR.
And speaking of Punk Rockin' 4220, they also left a nice iTunes review here as well. We appreciate that. It helps us a ton. If you would like to help us in this regard, just hop over to iTunes, type in Hearthstone or Well Met or BlizzPro and find us on the list. Click the little 5-star button, leave a little review. Those things help us a ton to get seen by the podcast community out there and help us get listened by more people, which is good things.
You just making words up as you go, like making your sentences.
I need to just write this down sometime rather than just trying to go like impromptu. But I feel like if I go impromptu, you get to hear me just ramble about stupid junk.
I think you're doing it great, though. You're doing great. Well, we got you talking and rambling about stupid junk. What's your shout out for this week, or shout outs?
Oh, man, I haven't even thought about that. So I'm going to shout out that Christmas is almost here, and I might be off for like 2.5 weeks from work.
Nice.
So I'm going to write a Twitch chat bot in my free time.
You can work on that on my channel anytime you want. I'm going to be streaming a lot, so cool. What about you, Kebs? Shoutouts for the week.
Yeah, it's kind of the tail end of the season here. I got a week's worth of crazy stuff to get done. I'm actually working on some pieces covering all the biggest moments in Hearthstone esports in 2015. So kind of cool to just talk about it all this way. And I would really like to try and get some stuff done in that department and get that stuff out. You guys will have tons of cool stuff to read from me that I'm hoping will all hit this week. And then it's Christmas time and I'm done. I'm going to lay low, play a lot of Hearthstone, try to enjoy the holidays, spend some time with some family. Super excited for that. And I got a ton of friends coming to visit. So anybody out there who's going to be around the Western Canada area in the holiday season, hit me up. Let's say hi. We'll try and do something.
Awesome. As for me, no major shout-outs, but I am streaming, and I should be streaming quite a bit this week. And the next couple weeks, Katie's going to be out of town, so I'm going to have extra spare time. Twitch.tv/kicktripod if you ever want to come check it out. It's been pretty fun. Usually sit around like 10 to 15 people, so nothing huge, super relaxed, and just have fun. So yeah. Big thank you to everyone who came out to the show. Twitch.tv/BlizzPro every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. To check that out. Big thanks to Jake Butno of jakebutno.ca, as well as DreadScythe of ScytheDesigns.com. Send us your emails to wellmet@blizzpro.com. Send us your tweets at wellmetpodcast. We do have a subreddit at r/wellmetpodcast. Patreon.com/wellmetpodcast, of course. And we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and all those other great things. Thanks, guys. Episode 39, Elfine.
You can find John on Twitter at KickedTripod and on Twitch at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. You can find JR on Twitter at Eldorian and on Twitch at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. And you can find Kevin on Twitter at Lack of Realism and on Twitch at twitch.tv/OdinTV. BlizzPro.com. Beyond Noob.